Welcome, everybody. This is Craig from the University of Applied Research and Development. This is our Emergency Response and Risk Management podcast and videocast. We are privileged to be here today with Paul Mikita, who is in New Jersey, an emergency response and preparedness specialist with a hospital in that great state. So, Paul, thank you so much for being with us.
No worries. Glad to be here.
Paul, how long have you been in your position, and tell us what you do and how you do it?
In my position itself, I've been here for about 6 years. My primary function is to more so on the preparedness component of the hospital, making sure plans are in place, making sure the critical assessments are done, education developed, appropriate staff are trained, and then, if needed, which we're in that present state now, assisting and guiding the administration of the hospital towards response and recovery efforts from any incident.
And so when you say staff training, Paul, what particular things do you find are always on your training schedule?
Training schedule that I have, I try to keep it pretty full. A lot of it's incident management and incident command training for our administration. The staff know this set of staff of employees kind of knows how to manage things, but managing a disaster is different than managing the everyday. So making sure they have the tweaks and the tools and the knowledge base so that if they are called in to serve as an incident commander for the hospital at any given point in time, they at least have a basic understanding of the emergency management principles. Also responsible for mass casualty training for both the ED, the operating room, and all the other all their associated staff. I also do patient decontamination training for our decontamination team in the emergency department, as well as evacuation training for both the equipment and the clinical component of how do we manage patients if we God forbid did have to evacuate part of or all of the hospital.
What sort of situation?
Kind of busy.
Sorry, Paul, carry on.
Keeps me kind of busy.
I can imagine that's a very full schedule with a range of different topics. What kind of situations have you experienced where you've had to do decontamination?
We've had most of the ones recently that we've had, thankfully, have been either motor vehicle accidents involving gasoline or oil. We have had a couple of situations where we've had a couple of illegal drug dens found in the area where we had one or two explode, and we had components of what they used to cook methamphetamines get onto patients.
Wow!
So it's interesting trying to keep the staff up to speed. I mean, it's one of those things you don't want to see those things happen, but having those things happen actually reinforces the staff why they do the training every year. So it's kind of one of those catch-22s.
Paul, you mentioned about incident command center training. Do you have your own incident command center there in the hospital?
Yes, we do. We actually maintain a hospital command, or more along the lines of a hospital coordination center. Looking at it from the truer component, that incident command is done at where the emergency is, and anything above that is kind of coordinating. So yeah, we do maintain. Actually, we maintain 3 levels. We maintain an initial command center with our nursing supervision, so that if we had what we call a no-notice event, a mass casualty, an explosion, or something at the hospital, we can initially start command operations. And then we have a primary command center, which is where the administration would come in. We'd put more of a traditional emergency operations center type component to what we're looking to do.
So initial, primary, did I miss one? What was the third one?
Second, we have a backup one. A backup to the primary if we needed to.
Wow. So that's such a variety of things. Emergency response, and particularly preparedness, has so many components to it. Tell us about your background and things you've been through that you think have really prepared you for your role.
My background is rather varied. I've been involved in emergency services at some point in time, at some level, for the last 25 going on 26 years. I started as a basic EMT or first aider in the state. Went and became a emergency room nurse. From there, I became basically a paramedic for the state. While I was doing that, I went and got my master's degree in emergency management. And some of the things I've done over the course of the years, I've been involved in the evacuation of several apartment complexes on the EMS side. I served as the EMS liaison for my municipal OEM for a couple of years when I was younger. When I transitioned to the hospital, I kind of became part of the emergency management group, initially focusing specifically on the emergency department, but that eventually wound up putting me in the position I am now, where I'm responsible for not only just the emergency department, but the whole hospital.
Wow. So if you, in hindsight, if you could take yourself back to when you started where you are now with this organization, in hindsight, what do you see were the gaps in the organization that you would immediately plug to be prepared?
As with any, because the hospital I work for is a private nonprofit. But that being said, the ultimate game plan there is, to at least bring in enough money and to balance the income and the expense so that they can stay in business. So one of the biggest gaps I see in not only my private organization, but most private organizations is the emphasis on response and not preparedness. I tend to view when I talk to people about what I do, I tend to view my role as the insurance policy for the hospital. Now, it's like auto insurance. You don't want to have to pay for it, but when you get into that accident, you're happy you have it. Same basic concept. My knowledge, my background, my experience is going into the plans and the procedures and having the time to do that. It has, over the course of, realistically, we're in the middle of a pandemic, has actually markedly shortened the amount of time it took for the organization to get its hands around how we would respond. Whereas other organizations were sitting there and trying to invent the wheel, we were able to pull 3 or 4 plans together, take different parts of each plan, put it into one response plan. So within about a week, we had our process to go. But had a couple of years before me taking my position, that may not have necessarily been the case, just because the focuses were different.
Right. Okay.
But I tend to find that in any organization, people don't want to spend money on things they will hopefully never have to use.
Right. So Paul, now, like in the last 3 months, I would imagine your day-to-day focus has changed quite a lot, or been emphasized on what you need to focus on due to the pandemic. So how has your day-to-day life changed?
Actually, it has become markedly more routine. Previously, my day-to-day life would be walking in, prepping for either putting together prep stuff for education, doing research for procedures, research for policies, initiation of coordination efforts, just for planning type things. Nowadays, I pretty much walk in, I punch in, I go to the command center, and I'm doing planning operations for the command center for pretty much my entire shift.
Right. Okay. And so
that just kind of highlights the differences. Preparedness is, as you mentioned before, is very broad. It can be any sort of thing, but when you get into the response, it becomes a very specific matter, focusing exactly on the task at hand.
Right. And I would imagine because you are there and because of the preparation that you've already put in, and as you said, you've got policies or procedures mapped out, your plans already, you can bring them together and respond to the situation. Are there other instances that you're aware of, or can you give us a scenario that you know of where there are other organizations close by, without naming any names, where they don't have this capacity of you and what you've done, and how different it is?
There are some market differences. A lot of what I've heard from talking to some colleagues is the push for the no, specifically now, we're kind of in the middle of this, moving towards the tail end of it. So there's been some conversations like, the hospital command centers through administration, the hospital command centers are no longer required. Whereas, we're still using our command center, but we recognize that it's not necessarily needed for the response stage. Those procedures and those processes have been established and they're kind of running on their own. It's now moving the thought process from response to recovery. So some of the other organizations are having some fun trying to maintain their command centers where they have them. Pretty much just my opinion, prematurely without having a concise plan towards how they're going to get back up and operational.
So how are you changing your day-to-day focus? What things are you starting to implement as you're moving into this next stage?
Well, right now the big process here, we've had a lot of patients come through. We've had a lot of patients die. It's a matter of trying to do it's maintaining that balance between patient care, family information, and staff safety, as well as visitor safety and everything else. So it's a matter of trying to figure out what that balance is. But the processes that we've looked to implement here are usually decided upon as a collective group within the command center, taking account all those balancing things. So we've been able to implement processes for like visitation, where we've gone from absolutely no visitors to we've identified that we have some patients that because of the disease now needs family to be educated to assist them at home with devices that they've never dealt with before. So now we've kind of moved to, okay, well, now we have restricted visitation where it has to be approved through the command center, but certain criteria have to be met. So those types of processes and things like that we've been able to use the general processes and principles that emergency management has to help work out that balance.
Our industry partners that we set up the faculty with, it's a foundation called Waguna and the Wild Geese Academy, and they're all over the world, and they have some very interesting stories to tell from their experiences in being an incident command and emergency response. What's one of your most memorable or interesting situations you could tell us about?
In which aspect? Going back, I was the incident commander for the EMS branch commander for a fire at a 22-story apartment complex high rise. Thankfully, it wasn't like it wound up being more of a smoke condition inside than anything else. But it's definitely fun coordinating that many agencies between fire, EMS, police, rescue, township, because we had to bring the township out for sheltering and stuff like that. Those types of that scenario kind of sits with me where, we had enough ambulances there that when we lined them up, one behind the other, it traversed probably about 2.5 miles of roadway.
Wow.
Thankfully, we didn't need them, but that planning brought them there as if this truly gets to the worst case scenario, what are we going to need to do and how are we going to need to do it? I always have fun with a lot of my colleagues call me Dr. Evil because of the scenarios I come up with regards to education and training and tabletops and exercises and stuff like that. But in the last couple of weeks, they've all said keep them coming, because if I can train them and get them thinking for the worst case scenario, if we can write a plan or a procedure for that worst case scenario, anything in between is just a little piece of whatever puzzle that we've been able to put together for them. That's probably my biggest takeaway from any of this. I try to spend about 80% of my time doing preparedness, the research for the plans, the evaluations, the assessments, the education development, the hazard assessments, because in reality, I've seen the benefit both personally with myself, with the training and the experiences I've had, and the ones I've been able to impart on my colleagues in my current position, to know that, preparedness is where it's at. And as I wind up telling people when we do when I do exercises, this is kind of like sports. At the end of the day, sports teams don't just get on the field and play a game. They scrimmage beforehand, they practice beforehand, they develop plays beforehand. They even go so far as to watch films of their opponents that they're watching. Each of those steps is actually equatable to a step in the preparedness cycle. And it's only when they get to the game day that they enter that response mode. Now, at the end of the day, any emergency we have is our game day. And if we've gotten to that point without practicing, we're going to do as well as any sports team that's never played together on game day, against a planned challenger. So I mean that's one of my biggest takeaways is trying to get people to realize that this is something we deal with that every day as a society, and it's just looking at it from a different aspect, different view.
I love that analogy. That's really, really great. Seeing yourself as like a professional sports team. That's a great analogy. So
yeah,
Paul,
and it winds up being fun, especially like in the healthcare world, because the team you're scheduled with is very rarely ever the same. So I always sit there and say, okay, now imagine your team getting on the field to play a game, and oh, by the way, you've never practiced before, and you've never played together before, and you usually watch everybody go. They usually give me the holy crap look, like this. That's truly what it's going to wind up being.
right. So Paul, if people that are watching this and they are preparing for a career and they'd love to do what you do, what are some of the things that you would tell them that they need to plan to do over the next few years, experiences and trainings?
The first thing I would do is try to at least get into, not so much doesn't necessarily need to be the emergency management field, but the field that they want to do emergency management in. I can probably attribute any successes I've had in the healthcare emergency management world to being in it for 20 plus years at different levels. It allows me to bring in all those different experiences. It's kind of hard to me, it would be kind of hard to walk into healthcare emergency management not having been in healthcare. There's so many different nuances that have to be, that you can only learn by being in it. And then as they get into that, most agencies nowadays are doing some sort of business continuity planning. They're doing some sort of emergency management planning or some version of that component. As you get into the organization, start to become associated with those circles. And eventually you'll start seeing yourself getting involved in the things that start putting your fingers on where things are, and back that up with education and training. I've learned, or I've seen that education in this area tends to have a little bit more of a value long term than just training, because most of the training classes I've been are very specific for a very specific sort of thing. Whereas the education, and I'm sure the education that you're trying to impart is more general. It's the concept and the principles, and then the education on how to apply those to any situation, not just how to manage an incident, a train derailment, or how to manage a motor vehicle accident, but the general concepts of emergency management that you can use across any incident. Get into those, start to have a strategic mindset, not a tactical mindset. That's the one shortfall I see with a good chunk of my friends. Not in emergency, not that they're bad at the incident management, but because of their training, they're trained at the tactical level. What resources do I need for this? Versus the strategic level of, okay, well, we're here. What are the next steps going to be? I tend to find that's a very unique mindset compared to how most technical people are trained. And those I think would be my big takeaways. Don't necessarily just jump right into the emergency management of a particular area, because you're going to miss, like I said, a lot of those nuances that are going to make you that much better at what you're trying to do.
That's really great, Paul. Hey, if people who are watching this wanted to reach out to you, what's the best way to do that?
I can give you, if you want, I can give you my email.
Is it better to contact with you on LinkedIn, or I mean, just to follow you in your profile on LinkedIn or Facebook, or what's the best thing?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I'm kind of a dinosaur on the technology side. I don't always post things. I don't always post as much as I probably could or should. But if they want to hit me up on LinkedIn, I do answer the messages on LinkedIn. That's probably going to be the best way. And at that point, if I do, if I do decide to put some stuff out there, it'll be additional information for anybody who wants to follow.
Okay. So if it's okay with you, I'll put your LinkedIn link, the web link, with this podcast, so people can connect with you and follow what you're doing as well. This has been really informative. It's been great speaking to a real professional who's in it right now and has huge experience. So thank you so much for spending time with us.
Can I look behind me to the guy you're actually talking to? The real professional?
The real professional, the experienced leader. This is going to be very, very helpful for anyone who's watching this, but particularly for our students in our bachelor program and our master program. It's great to see people who are really in the role, because theory is one thing, but hearing it through the eyes of experience, it's a whole nother thing. So thank you.
Correct. No worries.